Welcome back to Spoonful of AI. I'm Carlos. I have with me today Gavin Purcell from AI for Humans podcast.
Hi. Nice to meet you. Nice to be here.
Nice to virtually meet you.
That's right.
That's what it is now. This whole world is just virtual meetings.
I mean, people have been telling me for the last 6 months to a year that I could put AI versions of myself on this, but it turns out not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet, but we'll see. Maybe in the future. Who knows?
We're in that gray area where so many of the apps that you talk about on your podcast and that we talk about on this show are almost there.
Also, but dude, some of them I don't. I mean, the funny thing is, I'll get nerdy pretty quickly on this, but like, there's a company called HeyGen which makes digital avatars, right? And which is the idea that you can create content with a version of yourself that'll speak like you and talk like you, and now they've made it so you can be in multiple shots. And to me, like, the whole idea of doing this thing is not about like, oh, I don't feel like it's important enough that I'm just going to ship it out to an AI. That just feels like, you know, the I don't know if you can swear on this, but like the inshitification problem, like that Cory Doctorow thing. It's like, if people really think people are going to watch their virtual AIs, I think that they're somewhat mistaken. I just continue to believe that that's not why people watch video content, particularly, or audio content. I mean, there's a great tool that's come out. We've talked about on the show called Notebook LM, which can make these kind of like fake podcasts. And I've seen a lot of people say like, I made a 10-part series of a history podcast with Notebook LM. And I'm like, okay, great. But like, the minute I know it's Notebook LM and I recognize those voices and I know this is an AI, I feel like it's lost the kind of uniqueness of you that I thought was cool in the first place. Like, that's where I think this weird world of like AI content is going to be strange until we get to the point where, and I think we will get to this point, where there become AI personalities that are unique and interesting on their own.
Yes.
And then suddenly draw fan bases in some form or another, which I think will happen, but maybe not for a few years at least.
Right. Where it's indistinguishable from like a person. You're like, okay, I like that person, which is also an AI. That makes sense.
Yes.
But we actually talked about Google Notebook on this podcast, and we used it at the Spoon to do like an intro to like a podcast or something. And it made sense that way, right?
Yeah.
Lots of times in the show, we talk about how I think you guys say it the same thing on your show, is like AI being the partner, being the co-partner, you know, to make something interesting. The personality, the person, the human is still a part of this thing. So I think that that's it. And like, but at the same time, like you said, with AI art, AI video, which I use all the time, and we'll get into that, like it's so close to almost being there where you can go, okay, I made this thing as a human. I made this thing. And now then when you're watching it as the entertainment thing, you are fooled. Like, you know, it is the movie and that's it. But we're not there yet. We're like in that gray.
Yeah. And I mean, there's people out there like the Door Brothers who are making a lot of those videos these days of like the Trump and Kamala breaking into a convenience store, stuff like that. And like, part of what I love about AI content right now is just that kind of weirdness factor to it, right? It's like a slightly off thing. I think the other side of this, which is hard to say to the people that make AI content, because I believe it's going to be a democratizer and it's going to be such a cool thing, is that like the truth of the matter with content in general, and this was the case even when like YouTube took off, is that you still have to be good at it. And I don't mean that in an insulting way, but you still have to know like, oh, what is a story and why does it matter? Or like, I see a lot, like I'm on the AI video subreddit quite often because I love AI video and I post some of my own stuff there. But a lot of people will post these like kind of dystopian, like really cool sci-fi looking things. But then like after a while, you're just like, this is just like rehashed, you know, Matrix again, or it's another version of Cyberpunk. And like, the truth of the matter is it's always the original concept and story that matters in some form or another. And I think that's what's interesting is if these AI tools can lift up original things and make them more easy to make, like to your point about like being a partner, like that's where it feels like the kind of revolution in terms of both not only video content, but you know, all content.
All content. Yeah. It's funny that I just thought of something I watched last night on YouTube. Was like a small documentary on Basquiat, who's one of my favorite artists of all time.
I love Basquiat.
Yeah. And they're talking about how he literally, you know, just took a bunch of stuff that he learned about and threw it into his paintings. But again, it was through his lens and through his anger and through his like life and experiences. And so that's what it comes down to. It's like, you can take all this stuff, but I'm the same thing. I'm in Discords for AI video and AI art, and I'll see like amazing things that are the things that I've saw before, or, you know, or they're not a story or whatever.
Yeah.
And not to get too far into it, but I have these kind of like universes and worlds that I build with AI, and I'm using it for like liminal spaces.
Yep.
But the idea is to tell a story about this place and then show that within like, progression and like where you're going. Now you're here. Now you're there. It's not just like another cool picture. So I think that that's a key part is to, it is the artist behind it.
Well, it's funny you say that because I've seen your videos. They're great. They're liminal space stuff. And I have friends of mine who are like super into that liminal space TikTok and all those sort of things. That's part of the reason why when Hedra first came around, or Hedra is what it is. We're going to meet the guy who actually makes Hedra today. But like I don't know if you saw those like AI dating videos that I did.
Yeah, those are great.
Yeah, it was just this thing. It's like, okay, well, what's a framework to put on something that would allow it to be funny and unique and different, but also like fit the model of what this is? And one of the great things that like Hedra does is amazing lip sync, but often if you try to use it too significantly, it will kind of fall off like a lot of AI tools do. So like I tried to make it look like these were VHS videos from the 1980s that were guys and women talking to camera, like talking about what's funny about what would it be like dating them? And there had jokes in there and stuff. But like that's a way of using the tools and to try to build a universe around something that makes sense for it. I mean, I'm a giant fan too of, we shot him out on the show a couple times and I got to meet him in person. That guy Neuralviz, who makes that cop series on YouTube. And also there's a really great cult movie he just made, but he's doing something similar in the same way.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like you said it exactly, like, or your content says it for you, is that you kind of like use the art form itself to tell a story, because if you just use it straight, like you said, it can show its AI-ness.
Yes.
Right? And
especially for even like the thing I think sometimes is like, for marketers, especially, right? Like, because marketing is such a weird thing. Like if you're creative and you want to do something creative and tell a story, that's one thing. But like for marketers, it's just so easy to tell. And if you're trying to like sell something, or if you're trying to like kind of put something over on somebody else and you're using an AI tool, but like you're not admitting to it, or you're doing something and it's just so obviously AI, then like it feels there's a falseness that's even stronger than a regular marketing piece.
Yeah, you have to lean into the weirdness of it. And I think, also because it comes down to back again to the art of itself, like Old Spice commercials, like that'd be perfect, right? Like weird videos like that. So, we're already into it. And we didn't really set it up, but AI for Humans is a podcast that you're on with Kevin Pereira.
That's right.
People should check that out. You talk about AI apps. You talk about everything AI, actually. Everything AI is hard to say. And everybody should check it out. But yeah, normally on the show, we talk to companies and people working at companies and how they use AI in their business, because so many times you'll hear the, dream of AI and all of its abilities, but you won't see the actual nuts and bolts of it. So on the show, we try to talk to people how they're using it and how they actually, how it's helping them. It's helping you because it's your host show.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we do this.
Yeah. So obviously the show is about AI. We use it quite a bit. I think that, there's a couple specific ways. So Kevin and I are old friends. We worked together at a channel called Attack of the Show a long time ago. And we've kind of known each other. We've done a bunch of AI stuff prior to this, and we were spending time kind of talking about this stuff. And we figured, why don't we make content about it? So a lot of what we do is really, like, I would say, human based, in that we talk to each other, we kind of prep a rundown, all that sort of thing. But we do use Descript is a tool we use to do the editing and recording of the podcast, which is, has a heavy AI functionality in it. But I think the truth of the matter is where I use AI quite a bit is both ideating and helping sometimes rewrite or edit stuff that I want to put out there. Like, I'm not a giant fan of LinkedIn, but I've been doing okay on LinkedIn lately, mostly because I've been using the AI to help me write and produce things about the show that we do to push out later. I mean, that's kind of and again, it's not like you always have to rewrite it yourself, but it's like a starting point to kind of get out there. The other thing that I think we really use it for is exploring what's possible in the entertainment space, right? And I think that, what we do pretty regularly, we haven't done the last couple episodes, but if you go back a couple episodes, we do an AI co-host on the show, which is something that Kevin and I were super interested in general, that how could you interact with a co-host that was created by an artificial intelligence? And we use one of the large language models, whether it's GPT-4o or Claude or Llama, which are the three kind of big large language models right now. and we come up with a prompt for a person, essentially a fake person, and we put it into the large language model, and we actually have a real-time conversation with the character who's playing a co-host. Kevin then, when we ask a question, we've created the prompt ahead of time, Kevin will take that response, drop it into a program called 11 Labs, which allows you to make a voice for it. And then he plays it back in real time. So we're actually interacting with this thing. It's a little delay, obviously, because you've got to wait for the thing to come out.
Yeah.
But it's just a good example of, like, for us, that was a way of showing off this technology kind of early on. I mean, we've been doing this podcast for a year and a half now. And I think that what that's led us to is that Kevin and I are actually in the midst of working on a startup right now, which is pretty cool, around this kind of like voice AI space. And we don't want to talk too much about it because it's a fun idea, but we're not like ready to get it out there yet. But it's a good example of like the idea of like using a tool in the AI space, understanding what it's capable of, and then like kind of expanding out from that space. So I think from a business standpoint, that's what we're using it a lot for. And obviously, to your point, like, every week on our show, what we're doing is kind of like putting, you know, the AI tools through the rigor and testing on different things. And, you know, this week, Kevin spent some time with an open source video model, which is pretty crazy. It's got some weird name that it's like EF52 TTS or something like that. But basically, it's, you know, you can take a 10-second snippet of your voice, or anybody's voice, unfortunately, because it's open source, and immediately create a voice model of it that can be run locally and uncensored. And like, those are the kind of things that we play with just to kind of see what they are. But that's kind of like the adventure we go on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, it's like literally making up your whole show. And I love the co-host idea. That's so smart. And I know that it takes some time to actually put that together because I'm doing a lot of AI stuff. And so much stuff people see, they go, oh, they just like, you know, use an app or something. Like, no. It's like many apps. It's like many prompts. It's some editing. Yeah.
I think that's the secret to any AI content that people don't understand. This is why I get so frustrated with people who are like AI artists or AI filmmakers all they do is prompt. It's like doing those stupid AI dating videos. You know, it took me, I wrote them. I then used Hedra to get the lip sync. I had to get backgrounds. I had to then take all of that, edit it myself with an editing program, and then create graphics to go on top of it. Like, it is not a plug this in and this comes out model. That is just, and I'm not sure if that's ever going to be the case. And maybe there's people who've always been worried about this like prompt to Hollywood world where you'd be able to put in as, you know, like, make me a movie where The Rock, drives across country with an otter, and you suddenly have this incredible, you know, otter riding next to The Rock. And like, that's like a decade away, maybe, you know, and even then who's going to give a shit? That's my other thing is like, do you think that the world at large wants to see your Rock and Otter movie? I don't know if that's the case. You know, I think that like there will be interesting things that could come out of that, but in the same way that making AI video is like a slot machine where you have to continually go back and back and back. Hopefully, I think that's where the human side of this all comes in.
I wonder though, now that you bring that up, I was going to go on another different tangent, but now I'm going to drive down this one, which is, I wonder if there is a line in the sand of technology and human. And what I mean by that is whatever we come up with, and including actual humanoid robots, which we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Does that have a line where it goes, yeah, it's still got to be human here, and it's still got to be robot or AI here? You know, because you just said like The Rock is in a new movie with an otter. And now I'm thinking of Bill Murray in
Groundhog. No, not Groundhog Day.
Yeah, Groundhog Day.
Oh, Groundhog Day. Oh, yeah.
Where he's driving with a little, and so, you know, you have that, and if it's indistinguishable, will it ever be indistinguishable? I guess that's the first question. Even if it is, like, is that entertaining enough for us to not have a human involved somewhere? You know? I don't know.
So there's a lot of people that have talked about this and written about it. I wish I could remember where. There's a great book I always tell people to read that's called Life 3.0 by this guy named Max Tegmark, which came out about 5 years ago. I've reread it a couple times now. It's a little dated now because it was pre like the LLM explosion, but he talks about the whole beginning of the book is like a mini novella about a company that basically creates an ASI, and the way that they fund themselves is they create first kids programming. And then they eventually make films that everybody wants to see, and that through algorithms and all this other stuff, they kind of know how to make these kind of films that are really good. And it's the AI doing it. So my thing is this. I think that just like with, chess is a good example, or Go, these are the things people talk about. Like, once chess was beaten by a computer, it was a couple years, and then suddenly humans started not to care about the fact that the computer could beat them anymore. They just wanted to play each other in chess, and human versus human matches took precedence over the computer, and everybody just kind of understood the computer could play chess better than anybody alive, right?
It could do it.
I think with movies and TV and entertainment, it's going to be a little different, which is really weird. And I don't know how close we are to this. Like, again, I think this is a ways away, but I do think at some point in the future, and I don't want to put a time on this, it could be, it's probably 5+, maybe 10+ years, but like there will be an AI that creates like a very moving piece of cinema or something like that. In fact, probably music might come first, which is kind of scary, but like music is relatively easier to make because it's a lower lift in some way.
Suno is just like incredible right now. So yeah.
Yeah. And Suno's got a ways to go before it's really great, but it's already really good. And I think that the idea that humans could like our emotion, any sort of fiction or anything we watch or listen to is driving our emotions. And essentially that can be figured out, right? Like you can figure that out. Mm-hmm. Now, the question will be will people say this was an AI generated thing or not? And I think that will probably affect people's perception of it. If a movie came out, again, 5-10 years from now, that was completely generated by an AI with no human hands on it at all, and they didn't say anything about it, that being AI, and it like won an award or anything like that, I don't think I would be that shocked. But I also think the minute you said something, it would change people's perceptions of it.
Real quick on that, though, I just saw on your show, which people should watch, I'll plug it another time, is Justine Bateman's whole, contract against, AI content, or at least explaining to people that, hey, this thing was made without AI. I don't know if people will care even in the future, because as I watch like a new anime, which I'm loving, this one called Dan to Dan, so good.
Good. It's on Netflix. I love anime, but I don't get a chance to watch them myself very often. But that's a good.
It's so weird, but it's really good. But the point is, tons of like computer animation, AI could be helping them with some of that. I don't know. The point is, at some point, I don't care if it's like you said, if it's fun enough, it's interesting enough. I'm content first. So I don't know. I think, again, similar to the programs themselves, I'm a futurist. I think it is all just the gray zone, and it won't matter. Like we're having a lot of conversations in a void, like a little, vacuum, because in 1 year, not even 5, in 1 year, some of the video models I'm working with, and I'm on a lot of beta tests as well, just like you are. I think it's 1 year, and we're like, no, that's a show. Okay. Yeah. So do I care enough that it's AI or not? And I think the answer is going to be no. So
I think that no one will care if it's a human making stuff with AI, right? I honestly agree with you 100% there. I think the idea that I think there will be a good neural viz is a good example. Again, I think there will be, 100 neural vizzes in a year from now who are making content across all sorts of genres and fiction and romances, Westerns, or whatever you want to make, right? Mm-hmm. Thing that I think is going to be trickier is end-to-end AI filmmaking, let's call it, or end-to-end AI whatever. That's the thing that I feel like people might think differently about.
Right, just AI just doing all of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think, by the way, this is what I was saying before, like I think it could be eventually good at it. And if it's good at it, like imagine, they talk about this world of I'm sorry if this is nerding out too much for people that might
please nerd out.
But but there's this whole theory of like, not a simulation is the wrong way to think about it, but that like the idea that like, instead of just like creating a clip eventually, that Sora or these other video models are kind of world simulators, and that you might be able to kind of simulate an entire world around you, meaning that like in a virtual space, you could create a virtual environment and maybe video games and all this stuff going forward. If there was an algorithmic AI driving that experience and creating it in real time, I think that would be incredibly immersive. And I think it would feel like, especially if you've plugged in the entire history of narrative fiction and narrative films to an AI, it could create very compelling scenarios. I do think, though, at that point, going back to Justine Bateman, who, again, I totally understand where Justine Bateman's coming from. I think this is a normal thing people have thought about technology across many generations, that they don't want like a transformative technology involved in their creative work and they move in some different direction, and that's totally fair. People should feel free to do that.
Yep.
But I feel like that's this crossing point of where like the AI is going to make everything is where it's going to get really weird. Because I think to your point, yes, in a year, I think in a year you could create essentially. There's a world where you in a year, maybe a little longer, depending on like Kling and Minimax and all these, especially the Chinese models, are getting very good just because they don't have a lot of IP restrictions on them. But you could create a compelling hour-long show, 2-hour-long movie if you had enough people working on it and enough time and space and being able to do it. That's very possible, especially if you've got a human written script, you've got a human choice making the direction choices, you've got an editor who knows what they're doing. Like we've already seen like 5-minute videos be really compelling in that way.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. In a year from now, I don't think people will care that much about human generated AI things. I think the bigger question I'm getting at is what does it look like if the AI is doing everything?
Yeah, no. And that's good because, that is a valid point of when we have discussions on the show about business, right? And business is jobs, and how do we, make something, or how do we provide a service, and what is AI going to replace for that kind of thing? I think that's the questions that come up. So, but I think we've proved it time and time again on the only 5 episodes we've done, is that it works really well as a partner, and it can expand what you're doing. It can help you do what you're doing. It can reduce costs in a good way. And to jump back real quick to what you said though about end-to-end AI, I think what's interesting, and again, I'm a yes and when it comes to all this stuff, so I'll take this. But if AI decides to make like a Netflix type service and then bases it on my likes, so right now if I go to my YouTube homepage, or everybody does, it is so fine tuned for me.
Yeah, for you. Yeah,
which I have a love-hate relationship with. It works really well, but at the same time, I'm not seeing new stuff. That's a whole tangent. But the point is, when I like it, like it did this morning, it's saying, hey, do you like this? You give it feedback. And it's just this whole, I refresh and I get this really great stuff. Now AI is doing that.
Yeah.
Right. So like that is another, and it's a Netflix. And then I go, oh, it's pulling on all my heartstrings. It knows my comedy likes. It's making, I think you should leave new series, which I would love.
Right.
And would I say no to a new, I think you should leave, even if it doesn't have Tim in it? Maybe not. So
yeah. And the tricky thing with a thing like I think you should leave, and that's a good example, is that there's so many comedic choices being made in every single one of those sketches.
Oh, well, he's a genius. I don't want to put that out there in the world.
No, I don't mean, of course not. What I'm saying though
is,
and it's one of a kind, right? Like,
he's one of a kind.
Tim Robinson is truly like one of a kind comedian, performance, all that stuff. And that's a perfect example of the kind of series that did you ever see, there's another good thing that came up in the AI video space. God, I cannot remember. It was these guys that were trying to make almost like a Adult Swim style show, right? It was
called, they did. AI. I think I subscribed. Yeah.
And it's fun, right? It was it was 10 minutes long. It was a series of weird kind of sketches, and some of them were hits, some of them were missed. It's kind of like any sketch show, but that show was really their voice, in the same way that I think you should leave is Tim Robinson's voice.
Yes.
And that is an interesting pathway to this thing. It does feel that way. That goes back to the same idea of I don't know yet if there will be an AI that can truly feel like it's surprising in the voice of it, that the voice feels surprising. I theorize that yes, eventually we'll get there, but this is where it's going to go really off the radar. Is my theory is you don't get there until the AI start feeling in some way that they are real and individuals and have a consciousness and have feeling like they're really, and maybe that will have to be a rogue AI in the future, because no company is going to let the AIs do that. So who knows when or how that happens.
Remember that one story? I think you might have covered it. The AI that rewrote its programming so it could finish the job.
No, I don't know if I know that.
Oh, story. Okay. I don't know where I heard that, but it was, it told an AI to do something, and the goal of it was to finish his task, and it ran out of something. And so it rewrote its own programming so that it could finish the job. And they were like, no, bad AI.
Yeah, don't do
things
that.
like that.
That's how you get to the bad. That's how you get to the bad place.
That's how you get to Terminator. Well, before we go, I want to bring up an app. I usually bring up an app that people haven't heard about. You and Kevin know everything. So I can't do that. But what I will do is I use AI art and AI video every day. I make these worlds, but I'm using Photoshop, and the Photoshop beta, I don't think is talked about enough, because
I agree.
Premiere Pro has this one thing that you just mentioned on the show, which is an extension of 2 seconds for video. It is very cool, but it is not very useful yet, because 2 seconds is nothing. And as a Premiere editor, and I do all this stuff, it failed me just recently. Like we might talk about the positive things, but I literally did not help me, you know?
Yeah.
But where it does excel, and I don't think people are talking about enough, is the generative AI within the Photoshop. So and here's an example. Someone like AI art is beautiful. It has this great picture that came out of a human doing something. The hair is messed up. Like it just messed it up, right? I did a million generations. It won't get this one section right. It looks like they're balding. AI Photoshop beta is genius at that, right? You literally look at the area, you draw it in, make a little lasso around it. You've got to try a few different times, but it gives you 3 or 4 options. You pick one. Now that person has hair. That's small. Then you do like handbag, or you do a cat, or whatever you need in that shot. It's generally amazing, and it's only getting better. And so I always update it, you know, when it says like update your software. Yeah. And I just don't think people talk about that enough. And have you messed around with it?
I totally agree. I mean, I will say this, my experience with it, I mostly played with it when they first kind of came out, which was, I think, maybe like 6 to 9 months ago. And I had some experiences which were like fine, but I also I remember there was some AI co-host where I had to make their eyes bug out. And it's really hard, as you know, to do that with any sort of AI software, right? Like you can like in-paint the eyes, but like a lot of times they'll screw it up, because in-painting is asking the software to like reimagine entirely the thing. And the Photoshop beta was great about it, because you just kind of circle the eyes and then it gives you 3 choices and you can regenerate them. But I think we talked about this week Adobe's big updates, right? And like you mentioned, Generative Extend is one of them. And Adobe is a really interesting company in that, you know, going back to Justine Bateman and all this stuff, is that like there's so many people in the creative world that use Adobe products every day, right? Like you said, you edit on Premiere, the ton of people use Photoshop, they use Illustrator, they use After Effects, all these different things. And Adobe is just kind of like dropping these AI things that these same people might feel bad about using, whether it's Ideogram or Midjourney. They might be like, I'm never going to use an AI tool. But it's a very similar tool, outside of the fact that Adobe is particularly saying that they are not training on artists, which understandable. There is some dirty data there still, even in the Adobe model, but they're specifically trying to say that they don't have artists in their training. And I just think it's such a cool thing to see those things be used by the people that should be using them, because like it's a way into people who maybe before were afraid of AI for one particular reason. Maybe it was they had a friend who told them the AI is bad and AI tools are bad and that AI art is not actual art. Or maybe it's somebody else who just has a system of they've been doing things forever. But Photoshop is the perfect like kind of Trojan horse in some ways, because you know, they've been using Photoshop for 20 years. And the thing I always tell people about Photoshop, and Kevin and I have talked about this on the show a couple of times, is do you know photographers hated Photoshop in the beginning, right? Like you and I are both old enough to remember the old days of original digital manipulation tools. People who did digital art were seen as lesser than. They were seen as people that were copying stuff. They were seen as people who were doing things that wasn't right. And I mean, going back to even to Basquiat that you mentioned originally, like Basquiat was a street artist in a lot of ways and doing things like bringing stuff from street art elements into things. And I think people had a similar response to the stuff that he was doing.
So he's copying things.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just kind of the same argument that you just can watch go over time. But the long story short is like Photoshop is amazing and people should use that beta. Like there's a Photoshop, if you're in the Adobe program, you can get access to the beta tools. And that's where a lot of this generative stuff is. And if nothing else, just like try it, because sometimes the great thing about the Adobe stuff is it solves problems. Whereas sometimes other AI tools do really amazing things, but they create problems, if you know what I mean.
Right. Or it's just like a fun little, I can squish this thing. I'm looking at you, Pika. Pika just released like 3 more of those. And I'm like,
I saw that. Yeah.
It's great for social. Like that's fine. But then
it's so funny. Yeah. So I was going to say, sorry. So I think funny thing about that is like they need to do something to kind of get people to use their software, which is great. But after a while, it's just like, okay, it's a one-trick pony. Then what am I coming back to you for?
Well, and like you, I'm sure, like we go put it through its paces. So as soon as I jumped in there and couldn't use it because the only thing was available. This is in the weeds now real quick, but the only thing, and you already know this, but everything that was available was the little social kind of AI stuff. Then when you try to use the actual tool, it wasn't working. Then when it finally did work, it was like a smoke and mirrors thing. I really felt like cheated in a way. Sorry, Pika, but and I subscribed and everything.
Oh, you did? Wow. Good for them.
That's what we do. You know,
I know. There's also the other side of this, which is Kevin and I laugh about this all the time. Like, we don't really make any money on the show, mostly because it was like, you're not a giant show, but also because we spend so much money on these tools, right? Like we actually spend a lot of money on these tools, and you know, it's like, it's expensive to be a creative in the AI space, you know, because especially if you're an Adobe person already, you're paying for that. Then you're adding another like couple $100 on top of that to other stuff. It's
easy crazy. With Runway too, because I have the Runway, the Gen 3, which has come through for me a lot of times.
Yeah, it's good. Runway Gen 3 is very good.
And I did subscribe to Minimax because that is one of my favorite video tools. But to finish that is like, when I did use Pika, I was like, oh yeah, I can't use this. Like, this is not helping me. Or like the actual generations, like even image to video was like breaking hard. And I was like, oof, you're not ready yet. And I feel like that they made that little social experiment to get everybody to use it, but you can't do that unless I think your core model's ready. That's in the weeds.
I agree.
We're out of here, but people should listen to AI for Humans. And thank you for being here. But also, is there anything else you want to plug? The company you can't talk about yet, but you did mention it on this show first, I will say.
Yeah, that's true, actually. That is true. We haven't talked about it in public yet. It's something that Kevin and I are very excited about. I'll put it that way. And it's also something that kind of crosses over with our entertainment backgrounds and AI in an interesting way. And I'm pretty cool about it. But yeah, please go watch us on YouTube or listen to us in the podcast. Probably kind of even split in terms of where our audience is. Like, a lot of people are YouTube people and they love watching on YouTube. We also have a lot of like weirdly creative entertainment professional people, which makes sense given our backgrounds. I worked in TV for a long time. I worked at The Tonight Show and then with Kevin at G4, and Kevin has spaced his career across many different things in TV and digital tech and stuff. So we get a lot of people in the entertainment business who listen to the show, especially like kind of creative executives and trying to kind of catch up on all that stuff. But if you're like kind of nerdy and excited about what these things look like, YouTube is kind of a good place because we do a weekly show which has visuals of all the stuff we talk about, which oftentimes is useful when you're kind of learning and wanting to see this stuff.
Oh, I can't even imagine just listening to the podcast, really.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't, but like for me,
I know what you're saying.
You're on my homepage. When it pops up, I go, oh, there it is. And I have to see all the crazy stuff because it's a lot of it's visual. So I would recommend the YouTube.
That's awesome. Gavin, well, thanks so much for having me. This was great.
Yeah, and we'll maybe have you back on and when the AI gets smarter, which is like, I don't know, tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. It's coming very soon.
I know.
For all we know. Yeah.
All right. See you later. Bye. That's the end of the show.
Bye.
I never have good endings.